But so they're using the justification of there being a supposed labor shortage to say that we need to allow children to expand the hours that they're allowed to work.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We've got Sarah Lazare. She is the former former web editor of In These Times magazine and is currently editor at Workday Magazine, which covers labor and working folks in the Midwest. Sarah, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So you've got this article in the American Prospect titled The Conservative AstroTurf Organization Rolling Back Child Labor Protections. Who is that conservative AstroTurf organization?
That conservative AstroTurf organization is called the National Federation of Independent Business. They present themselves as a trade association of mom and pop stores. In reality, they are a very well-funded conservative organization who has been around many, many decades that pushes for policy that benefits corporate America. Their funding sources are very untransparent. I tried quite a bit to get information about where their current funding comes from. What we do know is that roughly 10 years ago, it was revealed that the National Federation of Independent Business had received $3.7 million from Crossroads GPS, which was co-founded by the conservative consultant and lobbyist Karl Rove. And also around that same time, the National Federation of Independent Business received $2.5 million from groups affiliated with the Koch network. And that was reported by the Washington Post. So
Right.
So the National Federation of Independent Business is a conservative organization that goes around advocating for all of the conservative causes célèbres.
Yeah, and they kind of act like, like you said, they kind of front like they are, we're just mom and pop businesses, but I think that these funding sources, it's not exactly clear where everything is coming from, but within the last 10 years, we know that they've gotten at least $6 million from Karl Rove and the Koch brothers, and their organizations, right? And I think that that's pretty indicative of, if they were really just an organization of small businesses, they wouldn't need that money, right? Organizations of workers, unions, we don't get millions of dollars from these other organizations, billionaire, millionaire funders. We get it in, a UPS driver giving his union, $20 a week, federal worker given $20 a pay period, machinists given $90 a month, stuff like that. That's where unions get their money from. But at least some, and it's unclear how much, but at least some of their money is coming from these big conservative donors, and they are, and you said, they basically follow the conservative cause, the conservative cause of the day, which is not what the average small business owner would be doing. The average small business owner is not a reactionary conservative ideologue, right?
Yeah, so about 97% of the time, the National Federation of Independent Business endorses conservative politicians, and they have gotten behind a whole host of conservative causes. They sued the Obama administration under the Affordable Care Act. This is to the right of the average small business owner based on what we know about them. I will say we don't have current information about where NFIB's funding comes from. I think that there's a good chance that it still comes from these conservative organizations. They also get money from their members, and I asked them several times to give me a full list of their members, and they wouldn't. It's hard to know who exactly is funding them just in terms of member donations.
Right. So let's talk about this child labor stuff. What are the particular changes to the law that they're trying to push?
So this is really nefarious because they are using the justification of the so-called labor shortage, which a lot of labor activists will tell you actually is just a shortage of good, well-paying, dignified jobs. But so they're using the justification of there being a supposed labor shortage to say that we need to allow children to expand the hours that they're allowed to work. So in Ohio, a bill was introduced in October of 2021, bipartisan, so supported by both Republican and Democratic lawmakers in the state, and it proposes to allow 14 and 15-year-olds to work until 9 o'clock p.m. on a school night if they get permission from a parent or a legal guardian. Just one important detail, this would apply to employers who are not covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act, which is a piece of federal labor law. But the lawmakers also introduced a concurrent resolution that calls on Congress to loosen that federal labor law. So essentially what they're trying to do is weaken child labor protections across the country. Having kids as young as 14 work more hours is really troubling. There are studies that show that teenagers working too many hours, especially during the school year, have a pretty negative impact on their development, can lead to behavior problems. You know, child labor laws were created in the first place on the basic principle that children are vulnerable members of our society who should be protected and shouldn't have to work all the time. And so the National Federation of Independent Business on December 15th of 2021 submitted testimony in support of the effort. They did so alongside a whole host of businesses and corporations. The Ohio Restaurant Association submitted this really absurd testimony where they actually said that having kids as young as 14 working more hours is good because it saves them from screen time, which was a pretty amazing argument to be making. Right. So that's the Ohio bill. The Wisconsin bill, which was actually vetoed by the governor in February, was similar. It would have permitted kids as young as 14 to work as late as 9:30 p.m. on a school night and until 11 p.m. when they don't have class the following day. And it also would have applied to employers who are not covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act. And state lobbying records show that the National Federation of Independent Business supported the bill. So even though that bill was vetoed by the governor, it's still concerning because that governor is up for re-election, and there's a new governor who's been endorsed by Trump, who is actually running. So it is actually feasible that this could pass in the future. And then there's a third similar bill that the National Federation of Independent Businesses also supported. That one passed in New Jersey. It was signed into law by the governor in July, and it permits 16 and 17-year-olds to work as much as 50 hours a week when they're not in school, and allows 14 and 15-year-olds to work as many as 40 hours during the summer months. So this is different from the others because it doesn't go beyond what's permitted in the Fair Labor Standards Act, but rather it rolls back New Jersey's youth employment laws, which had previously been more protective. So the way the FLSA works is that whichever law is more protective of workers reigns. So the National Federation of Independent Businesses lobbied for the measure. The state's organizing director testified in favor. And so, you know, there are a lot of different businesses that are advocating for these kinds of measures. If you just read local news reports, you will see, you know, the owner of a local Dairy Queen and, you know, I think Six Flags supported one of these measures in one of the states. So there are a lot of different businesses, but the National Federation of Independent Business really stuck out just because they have this conservative history. And one of the things I will say is that they have been using the so-called labor shortage to justify why we need kids to be able to work more hours. But they have been arguing for anti-worker, anti-union, deregulatory measures long before the so-called labor shortage existed. You know, they're in the 70s, they lobbied against the OSHA Act. They were big supporters of the Janus decision in 2018 that gutted public sector unions. So it makes them look pretty disingenuous that they're arguing for the things they already had an interest in arguing for, but using the so-called labor shortage to justify it now.
Right. And they were one of the people, for our Alabama listeners, they were some of the people that were pushing, and of course this happened across the country, they were pushing deregulation and a lack of liability for employers who recklessly placed employees in harm's way during the pandemic with respect to the coronavirus. They pushed a law that passed here in Alabama that would shield employers from liability who recklessly put their employees in danger. Even in the face of zero lawsuits, almost no lawsuits have been filed against people for, having contracted coronavirus at work, because that would be very difficult to prove. But, there should be, if you're, especially during the middle of the pandemic, right when it was first starting, if you're cramming people and making them work in super confined spaces without any masks and all this stuff, just really egregious, reckless stuff, there should be some amount of recourse for workers, and they took that away here in Alabama, and that's one of the things that they pushed at the beginning of the pandemic. And so Sarah, one of the things that you mentioned in this article was that there are other organizations trying to pull back child labor protections, and one of them said that work is a gift our kids can handle. So, Sarah, are you sure that you're not, in a sense, stealing candy from these children, in a certain sense, like stealing gifts from them, stealing the gift of labor?
Yeah, child labor is one of the great privileges that children get to have. How cruel of me. The mental gymnastics that people will do to say that it's good for children to work are incredibly cynical. I don't think that, Betsy DeVos's family or the children of the people who are in leadership roles at the National Federation of Independent Businesses, I don't think they're the ones lining up first to say, okay, I'm going to work extra hours or have my 14-year-old work extra hours at Dairy Queen or bagging groceries. They're not talking about their own kids. And it's the same with those workers who were sent into perilous, lethal conditions and then deprived of the basic tools that they had for accountability after the fact, after they were already harmed. It's not the head of NFIB. It's not the, conservative donors who we know gave donations to them 10 years ago who are saying, okay, well, let me be the first in line to be a server or work at a meatpacking plant or work in one of the industries where people were dying the most. We know who they're talking about. They're talking about poor and working class families and kids. Those are the sacrificial lambs. That's who we're talking about when we're saying that the labor shortage needs to be filled on the backs of children.
Right. Yep, that's absolutely right. It's not these people that are going to be doing these things. It's going to be us,
no.
and that's why it's important to understand who these people are that are pushing these kinds of things and why we should oppose it. Sarah Lazare is editor at Workday Magazine. Where can people find that and your other work?
Yeah, workdaymagazine.org is our website, and we partner with a lot of different publications. The American Prospect is one of our publishing partners. So this piece that you referenced is a co-publication of Workday Magazine and the American Prospect. And we would love it if folks would check us out. We cover labor in the Midwest, and we also cover international labor issues.
Sarah, thanks
for
taking
we're big fans of the Valley Labor Report too.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to come on this morning. Have a good one. All right.
All right. Thanks so much.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.